Bijan Robinson is the do-it-all running back that's in a perfect situation here in Atlanta. So says my guest, Damian Parson of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. We'll talk with him about the rest of the Falcons draft class and if they've done enough to put them into playoff contention come January.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. Sirius Black, and, of course, the very humble host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And this episode of Locked On Falcons is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on the journey of self-discovery wherever you are. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today and to get 10% off your first month. And guys, I want to thank everyone that makes Locked On Falcons their first listen each and every day. You hold a special place in my heart as everydayers, and all you non-everydayers, follow their blueprint by subscribing or follow for free on YouTube wherever you get your podcast. So today's episode, we will be joined by Damian Parson of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, as well as the draftnetwork.com to get his thoughts on Bijan Robinson and the Falcons 2023 draft class. Later in the episode, we'll be talking about the Falcons' newest addition to their roster in ex-Bengals cornerback / safety Trey Flowers, and we'll touch upon what he brings to the table for the Atlanta Falcons, as well as potentially who he might be pushing off the roster at the end of today's episode. But first, let's get into that conversation with DP and his thoughts on Bijan Robinson. All right, everyone, we are back with another illustrious guest. He is none other than Damian Parson, who is the co-host of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can also find his written video and all types of draft-related content over at the Draft Network. Damian, my friend, welcome back to the show.
I appreciate you having me back, brother. It's always good talking ball with you. Shout out to the Falcons fans. They show me a lot of love on social media. So, nothing but love this way as well.
Yes. The minute you say anything bad about Bijan Robinson or Desmond
Jesus
Ridder,
Christ.
we will come for you, though.
No, 100%. I know that now. I know that 100%.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Bijan Robinson and that selection. You have some people that love the pick. You have some people that were, I won't say hated, but certainly questioned it. I'm just curious, where did you come down on that pick?
I mean, it's not a bad pick. I mean, you got a blue chip player, like one of the only 3 blue chip players in the class. He does everything: catch the ball in the backfield, run between tackles, bounce. He can bounce runs outside. So this is a guy that, for a run heavy offense, he's going to have, I think me and Keith talked about on Locked On NFL Draft, which running back was put in the perfect situation. It was Bijan Robinson. He's going to Arthur Smith's run-heavy offense that wants to pound the rock and play, clock control and everything. So the pick overall, I liked it, especially because of the talent. My main thing was just, okay, I just looked at, all right, I got AJ Terrell. Like I looked at the edge rushers that were available, like the Miles Murphys. You got Christian Gonzalez. And I'm like, man, I would have loved to have one of those type of guys on the defense, because at the end of the day, that's really where the growth needed to happen for the Atlanta Falcons was defensively. And yeah, Bijan can help in terms of keeping them fresh, on the sideline and things like that, control the clock. But it's more so like, man, if you put yourself in a situation like, all right, if I do get into a shootout, that's the question I asked. Is my defense good enough to get a couple stops versus the Philadelphia Eagles versus, a Dallas Cowboys, if their offense is humming, these different offenses, the Vikings and different things like that, can my defense put their cleats in the ground and get us consecutive stops if we need them to? And I just was like, all right, I know that a Gonzalez or a Miles Murphy, a true edge rusher, could really have helped that. But getting Bijan, it wasn't for those who really, really dislike it, I know what it is. It's the positional value. I get it. I totally get it. But, understand that at the end of the day, what I think the big thing is what Tyler Algier lacks in terms of athleticism and agility and speed, Bijan's going to bring to the table.
Yeah, the whole positional value conversation is something that I have basically thrown away here on the podcast, because obviously, I mean, there's really no argument. All the data basically tells you that, running backs don't matter and the running game is not important and all that stuff. But I just sit here and I go, like, there's got to be an exception to the rule, right? And Bijan is like, it has to be that exception. Is that a fair thing to say?
No, I mean, it is. And, my main thing is I always said, like, and for me is I always look at running back like quarterback. And it's like, man, if your team's terrible, don't draft one. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a really bad team, like that Panthers team that drafted, Christian McCaffrey, don't do it. Like, I mean, you're not gonna get the return on your investment. But the Falcons you guys are not in that type of situation. And I understand what Arthur Smith is looking at it from the aspect of, because I truly believe this. Like, I don't think Arthur Smith is, and some people may disagree, I don't think he's safe in terms of his job security. And it's more so like, all right, I see that there's blood in the water in the NFC South. And if I can get to the playoffs, I can, I can reset my clock a little bit. And I think that's what he was going for, getting guys that can come in and play right away. And the one position that you typically can get immediate value out of are running backs. It doesn't take a whole lot for a running back to, sometimes you guys because even with a Bijan has a tendency to turn down interior run lanes and jump cut outside and stuff like that. And you want him to, just kind of sometimes stick to it, because it's like, all right, because Saquon used to do that a lot coming out of Penn State. He would look inside, like, I'm a jump cut. But it's like Saquon, in terms of like burst and explosiveness, is a little different guy. But like overall, it doesn't take a lot for running backs to really get acclimated to the league. You just got to get acclimated to the speed and make sure that you're being disciplined, because the NFL defenders are just so much more faster, bigger, stronger, and they are more disciplined as well in terms of cutting off running lanes. But other than that, man, I mean, he will help Desmond Ridder, like I said, especially Arthur Smith runs a lot of pistol sets. The king and queen variation, where you have you come out in 12 personnel, where it looks different. It's not two tight ends on the line. It's one tight end on the line, another tight end as an H-back flanking, Desmond Ridder, and then Bijan in the back, right behind him in the backfield. And that can create different variations of zone read and inside zone and split zone and different things like that. So this run game is going to be extremely creative. I love the way that it was creative last year with the Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson. I can't wait to study this offense 3-4 weeks into the season when they really start getting rolling, with Bijan being your starting back.
Absolutely. Well, we'll talk a little bit later on the pod on whether or not the Falcons can get things rolling enough to make to the postseason. We'll get Dame's thoughts on that, but I do want to get his thoughts on the rest of the Falcons draft class and see if the Falcons nabbed any of Dame's dudes with their other 5 picks in this draft class, and we'll get into that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So, guys, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp, and you've heard me talk about the benefits that I've gotten from getting into therapy with BetterHelp over the summer. And, if you've enjoyed this podcast over the last year and the alleged improvements it's made, you can partially thank BetterHelp for that, because one of the things it's helped me understand is that I can control what I can control. I can't control if the Falcons draft a player I like. I can't control if the Falcons win a football game. What I can control is the quality of this podcast. And I've heard a lot of feedback from you guys over the last year that you've seen an improvement in this podcast. And again, I think some of that is owed to BetterHelp, and BetterHelp and therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's well worth it. I highly recommend it. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You'll get matched with a licensed therapist right away, and you can then switch therapists if you feel the need to, for no additional charge. So find more balance in your balance with BetterHelp by visiting BetterHelp.com/lockedon today, and you'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So, guys, here with Damian Parson of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast and the Draft Network. And Dame, you have a lot of dudes out there, players that you are a big fan of. It seems like every week on Locked On NFL Draft, Keith is asking you, your co-host Keith Sanchez is asking you, is this guy a Dame's dude? And it feels like you rattle off like 6 names. And so I feel like you have like 200 guys that are Dame's dudes. But I'm curious if any of those guys were selected by the Atlanta Falcons after round 1.
Trying to remember how I felt about Clark Phillips. What I said on the pod. I'm pretty sure. Clark was one of my dudes. It was Clark and THT, and I said Clark was more of one of my dudes than THT was. Clark was the guy, and I love the pick mainly because of the value. Like, you're talking about one of the better corners in college football. Ball skills, competitive, play press man, play off, played zone, very scheme versatile. Now, we got to the combine, and he did not measure in at 5'10", like I thought he was. 5'10", 5'11". It was like, well, that's a little bit of a disappointment because I thought he was taller. He looked taller on tape to me. So he coming in at 5'9", I think what's going to end up happening is he's more than likely going to get kicked down inside at the nickel. And, you have Jeff Okudah, at the other outside position. But what it allows you to do is keep AJ Terrell from having to travel. Put him on his side of the field. Let him lock down his side. Let Clark Phillips play in the nickel. And him and Jeff Okudah both can rotate in and out as a nickel and outside corner. So, yeah, I love the pick, the value. Get him in the 4th round. You know what I mean? Like, this guy, not only does he have the ball skills, but he had the return ability to when he took the ball away, he could take it back for 6. And that helps. You need that type of guy on defense where if you do test him and the quarterback, he's late on the throw or he's not on, he's not precise. Like, Clark can make a play on the ball and then keep his balance after making the play and taking it to the end zone, man, putting up points for your defense. And anytime you got your defense can score for you, that's always a good thing.
Yeah. Now, you talk about how much you liked Clark Phillips. Were there any of the other picks that the Falcons had that maybe had you a little bit less in love, maybe scratching your head a little bit?
Zach Harrison in the 3rd round. I liked Zach Harrison, a little bit. Toolsy kid. Like, this young man has all the physical traits and athleticism. You think he tested out of this world. He's big, strong, But when you turn on the tape, you see someone that's technically unrefined, someone that's just not consistent. And for a team that, to me, I like the Calais Campbell signing and the David Onyemata signing, the edge, what you're telling me is like, okay, we're banking on D'Angelo Malone and Otto Epiketti to be our fastballs off the edge and our sack getters, our go getters, right? I always talk about, like, with basketball, when you need a bucket, we saw it last night. The Phoenix Suns needed a bucket. Devin Booker, like, it didn't really matter, right? And it's the same thing in the NFL. When you need a guy that can, a receiver, I need a catch. I need a big catch. You look at the Julio Jones who spent most of his year there, right? You look at Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Those guys can go get it. You know what I mean? Devon Millers and, these Myles Garrett and TJ Watts and those guys at edge rusher, like, they can go get you a sack. And I think the upside is there for either one of those guys in terms of Malone and Epiketti, but you're banking on them taking that next step. Because for me personally, I don't even view Zach Harrison as a true edge rusher. I view him more so a guy that when you rush him, you want to make him a 3-tech and reduce him inside and allow that length and that power and that speed to overwhelm guards on the interior, to where now you allow him, because it's hard for him to, like, if his hands don't win immediately, it's like, okay, can he turn the corner? Can he flip and rotate those hips to close on the quarterback and win that outside arc? And it's not something you see a lot on tape, but I think the upside for him, Aaron, is like, man, you reduce him inside at 3-tech. Of course, Grady's going to get double teamed no matter who he faces. They're going to double team Big Grady. They better. If they, if they don't, he's getting back there. So, like, if you double team Grady, you have a guy like Zach Harrison inside. I think that you get the chance to really put pressure from the interior right in the face and the lap of a quarterback, and that's the quickest path. But that was a pick I was a little, I think I graded him 4th round, day 3. So it was a little caught me off guard. I felt like there were some edge rushers they probably could have just added to this edge rush group, because I wanted to see more explosiveness and more consistency off the edge so that you can really maximize this defensive rebuild and retooling.
Yeah. I think that's a fair assessment. It feels like Harrison is more of a complementary pass rusher that if you have the, as you said, the fastballs coming off the edge, those guys forcing the quarterback to step up into the pocket. He can collapse the pocket. But he's not going to be the guy, as you put it, that's going to go out there and get you the bucket. He might be able to to use a bad basketball analogy. He'll get the rebound and kick it out to the guy that's going to take the shot. But like, he's
that's
not
a good analogy. That's actually a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So that makes sense. Any other thoughts on the other picks that the Falcons had? Any thoughts on Matthew Bergeron, DeMarcco Hellams, or Jovan Gwynn?
Hellams is a guy I've scouted for like the past 2 years. I thought he was going to come out last year, but he gives you a lot of versatility in the safety room. I think he can come down and play tight ends and man-to-man coverage and kind of play a big nickel. If you want to, kind of run with like a 3 safety rotation, if you wanted to do something like that, we see that a lot in the NFL. Pull a linebacker off the field and put a more athletic body on those 3rd and longs to be able to defend big, what we call power slots, those big body slot receivers and these tight ends. So I like especially the value, day 3, where they were able to get Hellams. I think he could be a good contributor to this defense as well as on special teams. And then I do like Matthew Bergeron, somebody that really impressed me down in Mobile. And when the pick happened, I was a little shocked that they kind of moved up for him, especially because I think, of course, from everything I've that's been said, is like he's more than likely going kick down and left guard. And I was like, again, I was like, man, edge rusher, corner, especially all the corners that were coming off the board in the 2nd round. Man, I would have loved to see a Julius Brents in Atlanta to pair with an AJ Terrell or something like that, and all these different. It's like I think it was like. I think 5 to 7 corners came off the board in round 2. So I think with him and then like the interior O-line, there were guys you really could have gotten there or used to playing guard, that are that's their position that you could have gotten really, like Emil Ekiyor. He went undrafted because he's more of a center that was playing guard for Alabama, but he can play guard. So there's a guy you could have gotten on day 3. And, you look at all these different guys, at the interior offensive line spot. So I felt like they could have, went and got a more impactful player on defense with that pick and then got an interior offensive lineman late. But Matthew Bergeron is a good player, powerful. You turn on the tape of him versus Isaiah Foskey when he's playing left tackle, at Syracuse versus Notre Dame. And Foskey is a power rusher, and he had absolutely no shot of powering through Matthew Bergeron. He was able to sit and anchor, really meet him at the apex. And then he played well at the Senior Bowl, man, really physical. I didn't expect him to be as physical as he was, so that really helps this run game and everything. So I like the pick overall, especially the player. Like I said, them moving up was kind of confusing to me a little bit.
Yeah. Similar conversation about positional value, right? You're putting so much value on a non-premium position. And so that's going to be the question for a lot of Falcons draft picks over the years. We that was the question about Kyle Pitts when the Falcons selected him. And so I think the Falcons have basically clearly said they don't care about positional value over the last couple of years in the draft. So that will be something that we'll have to keep an eye on in future drafts. But we'll move the conversation forward to talk about this Falcon team this season. And as Dame put it earlier, they're expecting to have some of these guys come in right away, impact, and whether or not that's going to lead to them, potentially playing games in January. And we'll get Dame's thoughts on that and the Falcons overall as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So, guys, wrapping up here with Damian Parson of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. And, of course, I want to thank everyone that makes Locked On Falcons their first listen each and every day. I always shout out my everydayers. And tomorrow's episode, we'll be talking more about Matthew Bergeron with offensive line guru Brandon Thorne, as well as Locked On Syracuse host Owen Valentine. But here with Dame Parson of Locked On NFL Draft, and want to talk, about the Falcons' overall outlook. Now that the draft is over, what is your thoughts on this Falcons team heading into the season? As you mentioned earlier, the NFC South is wide open. And certainly, at least in the state of Georgia, a lot of people are feeling very optimistic about this Falcons team. Are you buying stock on the Falcons being a playoff team this season?
I am. Last year they were very close. They were really close. It's some like one score games, some games that just didn't go their direction. Mariota not playing up to the level that we kind of hoped. I know I was hoping for him to play at a high level because I wanted to see him get another shot. He did, and it did not go the way I expected it to. So I think with this team, especially with the NFC South, man, Carolina fans, they feel good because they have Bryce. But there's a lot of question marks on that offense, receiver wise, things of that nature. And the biggest threat to win this division is the Saints, because you typically look at, okay, who has the best quarterback? And a lot of people say it's Derek Carr. He's the veteran. He's done it, for multiple years, about 5 years of 4,000 plus yards. So I think that's the biggest that's the biggest competitor right now. And I think that those are games that if you can get the run game going, kind of force them into coverages that are advantageous. The main thing I think that is going to dictate everything, right? A lot of people say, well, it's Desmond Ridder. Yeah, but I think the asterisk with that is it's going to be Arthur Smith and his play calling. Where in terms of you have to make defenses play honest football. If they come out there and they're playing, teams, if you can't run the ball, teams are going to play too high. You know what I mean? They're like, whatever. Like, if you got explosive passing options, you got Tyreek, the Miami Dolphins, they're playing too high. You're like, absolutely not. We're not letting those two guys get deep. So you want to keep all the explosive plays from happening. I think with the Falcons is Arthur Smith has to make sure you spent 2 high picks on pass catchers, in the most recent years with Drake London last year, I think pick 8, if I'm not mistaken. And then I think pick 3? I think it was 4. For Kyle Pick, 4 for Kyle Pick. So those are high picks that you picked on pass catchers. Get the passing game going. Like I said, there were splash plays available last year that Mariota couldn't convert on. I think Desmond Ridder can. So as long as Arthur Smith can be balanced, don't be too overly reliant on the run game. What I don't want him to do is don't be Greg Roman. You know what I mean? And anybody doesn't know that name, that was the offensive coordinator for Lamar Jackson, who was recently let go when they brought in Todd Monken. It was an offense that was predictable. Like, we know it's going to be zone read. We know it's going to be QB power. We know it's going to be run game and attacking between the numbers. It wasn't a vertical passing offense to really get you splash plays. So that's my main thing is like get Ridder comfortable early in the season, especially with the run game and everything, offensive line doing their job. But make sure that you get Kyle Pitts, a healthy Kyle Pitts, and Drake London. These guys should see no less than 80 targets for the season each. They got to get these boys involved because that's what's going to really dictate the coverages. Because if they go cover 1 with 1 high safety and you run the play action and you hit them over the top, then now defense coordinator is like, all right, now I might have to start pulling that safety back. And now that helps the run game because it changes the numbers in the run game. So I think, for them, the defense is much improved from last year. I think I know, one of my guys was on Twitter saying that, we got some cakewalks. I'm like, whoa, like relax. It's a little too early to be talking like that. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be this team's going to be competitive. It's going to be physical. It's going to be competitive. And what I expect them to do is turn games into a bar fight. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to turn into a backyard brawl with this run game. And hopefully the defense plays as physical as the offense could. And if so, shorten games, shorten possessions for opposing offenses. Derek Carr can't do anything if he's sitting on the sideline for half the game. You know what I mean? And that's the plan. So just be balanced so that you can actually do that and make those big explosive plays. And if so, I think you guys actually absolutely could win this division and host a playoff game. Atlanta be rocking. That first week of January if they could host a playoff game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree with you. The whole cakewalk thing. I would be surprised if the Falcons blow out anybody this season. I think they might have Arizona on the schedule, so we'll see about that
might
one.
Be it.
Yeah, but
that might be one.
But I do think there are going to be a lot of close games, as you mentioned earlier, like we saw last year. And I think the hope is that with the improvements that this team has made on both sides of the ball, those will be games that they will be able to finish and close out, and we will see this team. They might have like 12 or 13 one-score games this year,
right?
But hopefully, they can win like 8, 9, and possibly 10 of those games in order to put themselves in a position to make the postseason. So I think things are looking up with the Atlanta Falcons. Dame, I think this was a great breakdown of, not only their draft class, but things for people to look out for when the season starts. But let the people know that what they should be looking out for on the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, as well as the Draft Network over the ensuing months. I hear through the grapevine you're going to start turning your attention to the 2024 draft class. Of people need to get their Dallas Turner and Drake May and Marvin Harrison Jr., as well as, of course, Caleb Williams takes. I'm curious when you guys are going to get that stuff going over on Locked On NFL Draft.
Oh yeah, it's coming. We start summer scouting next Monday. Matter of fact, I'm actually taking a couple days and going to chill at the beach with the family. Man, get myself some time to decompress and get ready for it. But absolutely, we start summer scouting next week. Right now, we're going through kind of positional fits. Today, we broke down just kind of the 2023 versus 2022 cornerback class. And with me and Keith being on the opposite side of the spectrum, of which class we think was better, as prospects, not so much, because 2022 has had 2 all-pro rookies, but, definitely tap in with us. We're going through that. We're going to talk edge rushers on tomorrow's episode and everything. So we got a lot coming down the pipeline. 2024 will be here before you know it. We'll be talking to some, keep eyes on the rookies in minicamp and those second-year players as well, since we weren't here on the Locked On NFL draft for last draft cycle. So we're going to talk about guys, breakout candidates, guys that can have a rebound sophomore year after having a rough rookie year, things of that nature.
Absolutely. So I've been enjoying your guys' content over these last couple of months. Now that you've sort of taken over the reins of the podcast, no shade meant at the previous host or anything like that, but it's been great. And I definitely look forward to that summer scouting as I'm sitting here grinding film on Matthew Bergeron and DeMarcco Hellams. Part of me is going to be like, okay, who's going to be the stars in next year's class, that when I finally get the chance to sit back, relax, and watch some college football later this fall, who are the people I'm going to keep an eye on. So that will definitely be something on my radar in the coming weeks over the course of the summer. So Dame, again, really appreciate you coming on and joining me here on today's Locked On Falcons.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. And don't worry, we're not done on today's Locked On Falcons. And I want to again thank Damian Parson, aka DP, for joining me on today's episode. But let's talk about Trey Flowers, the ex-Bengals, ex-Seahawks cornerback that the Falcons signed today. And we talked about Trey Flowers roughly 7 weeks ago on this podcast. I believe it was the D-Hop episode where we talked about the possibility of trading for DeAndre Hopkins, because on that day, Trey Flowers visited the Falcons initially. And rather than just rehashing what I said about Trey Flowers on that episode, I'll just play you the 3 minutes that I said about Trey Flowers then. They still apply now. So, through the power of vetting, here you go. If you don't know anything about Trey Flowers, we're not referring to the former New England Patriots pass rusher that wrecked us in the Super Bowl several years ago. We're talking about a defensive back that was a former 5th-round pick of the Seattle Seahawks back in 2018. He started for the Seahawks as an outside corner for the first 2 years of his NFL career. Wasn't particularly great, and that's understandable because Trey Flowers wasn't a cornerback in college. He was a safety in college. He played safety at Oklahoma State, but because of his size and his length, Seattle did the thing that they had been doing a lot over the previous decade, which was try to convert him to corner. It didn't necessarily work. And to me, it's not to say that Trey Flowers was the catalyst that brought down their defense, but I think it's not a coincidence that they tried that. And then shortly after moving on from Trey Flowers, they wound up cutting him through midway through the 2021 season. But it was around that time when the Seattle realized, okay, the way the Seahawks style of defense, cover 3, all that sort of stuff, big, long corners that play zone. That style of defense is being phased out in the NFL, is going the way of the dodo, and let's try to get with the times. And so I don't think that's a coincidence that, Trey Flowers was kind of the last hurrah that the Seattle was trying to make to continue to play that style of defense. He was cut midway through 2021. The Bengals picked him up. And from what I understand, and again, I didn't talk about Trey Flowers with Jake Lisco of Locked On Bengals because I didn't know this at the time when we recorded this. But from what I understand, he played more of a safety role this past year. He kind of was designated as their tight end eraser for them with some of the AFC tight ends that they were facing. But his primary role the past 2 seasons in Cincinnati was on special teams, where he served as a gunner on the punt coverage team. And that's notable because the Falcons just added one gunner in Mac Hollins, who potentially could replace, Kadero Hodge, one of their gunners on the punt coverage team at the wide receiver position. And they also lost Mike Ford, their other gunner, at the cornerback position. So you could imagine the Falcons are targeting a guy like Trey Flowers to sort of step into that role as a reserve backup corner / safety that can play on special teams. So you're getting that special teams value. You're adding size to the cornerback room or really the DB room because of the loss of Isaiah Oliver. You're getting some positional versatility with Flowers being able to play not only corner but also safety, which is something that you're also missing due to the loss of Oliver, and we saw him dabble in that role late in last season. And you're getting a player that could also help you add some size to cover some of the tight ends, because for most of last year, the guy that the Falcons tasked with covering tight ends was Richie Grant. And while Richie Grant did an admirable job doing that, I don't think you ideally want a 5'11", 195-pound safety matching up against like 6'4", 6'5", 255-pound tight ends on a consistent basis. And Flowers, with his size about 6'2", 210, somewhere around there, is going to give you a lot more in that regard. So we'll see if the Falcons wind up adding Trey Flowers. So now that you are reminded of what Trey Flowers is potentially bringing to the table, and now we have like 47 additional days since then of roster moves that the Falcons have made. I do think Trey Flowers has a good shot of making the roster due to his special teams ability. And again, that's why you'll constantly hear me say special teams matters, because it's going to impact those back end roster spots in a major way. Someone on Twitter asked me after the Flowers signing, does this put DeMarcco Hellams, the Falcons 7th round pick, on the bubble? Because, Flowers can be a safety. And I don't think it does. I think Hellams should be able to carve out a special teams role relatively easily this year, basically potentially taking over for Eric Harris in that regard. But I do think the player that could be most affected by the Trey Flowers signing is Darren Hall, right? And that may prevent Hall from making the team, because Hall has not necessarily carved out a role on special teams. He's been part of the kickoff coverage the last 2 years, but you'll hear me constantly say kickoff coverage, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but it's hard to really carve out a niche on a team with kickoff coverage, because we know the league has basically marginalized kickoffs. And so if you want to be a special teams maven, right, air quotes for those in terms of that, it's really about punt coverage. And for a cornerback like Hall or Flowers, it's really about being a gunner, and Hall and Flowers, has that experience, and Hall doesn't, outside of a handful of snaps his rookie summer in the preseason. And so I do think this could potentially put Hall on the bubble. And this is going to be an interesting summer for players like Hall, as well as others from that 21 draft class, Jalen Mayfield, Adeogun Deji, Frank Darby. Like, this is the summer where I think a lot of those guys, they have to put it all together, because if they don't, they may find themselves, on those final cuts come, late August, early September, when that happens. So we'll see if Hall can put that together. We'll see what Flowers brings to the table and whatnot. But that's kind of my thoughts on the Trey Flowers signing. And, last week when I did my roster depth chart breakdown, I had Hall making the roster, but if I was to do that today, now after the Trey Flowers signing, I might leave Hall off the roster in that regard. So we'll see how it all, shakes out later this summer. We'll certainly be doing positional breakdowns, probably get to cornerback and safety, in mid-July before training camp starts. But we'll see, if the opinions have changed based, between now and then. So another 47 days or however long that is between now and then. So that's going to do it for us here, guys, on today's episode. As I said earlier, tomorrow's episode will feature Brandon Thorne of Offensive Line Masterminds, the Bleacher Report, he's a guru, Trench Warfare, Substack, and Locked On Syracuse host Owen Valentine. And we'll talk all about Matthew Bergeron, for all of you guys that are all about the trenches. Tomorrow's episode will definitely be for you, and continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. Check out Locked On NFL Draft if you want to get more insights from Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez about this past year's draft, as well as the upcoming draft in 2024. So go check that out. All part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.